Sri Lanka's former president's attempt to make a comeback have failed. Earlier results suggest Mahinda Rajapaksa was defeated by the same coalition he lost to 8 months ago. So what does this mean for Rajapaksa and the reforms the president wants to introduce? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. Simply an election defeat or the end of a political career. Sri Lanka's former president, Mahinda Rajapaksa, has been defeated in parliamentary elections. He'd hoped to become the country's new prime minister. Instead, Rajapaksa lost the position to reformers who want to dismantle most of his policies. We'll get to our discussion in just a moment, but first, Manel Fernandez sets up our story from the Sri Lankan capital, Colombo.
With the count ending in this parliamentary election of Sri Lanka, it's now time for the business of government and governance. The Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has secured, from what we're hearing, essentially the number in Parliament, the 225-seat legislature, the magic number there, 113, in order to basically control that Parliament and have the sort of controlling voice and presence. The former President Mahinda Rajapaksa falling short. He had talked about a lot of confidence that he would secure the vote, saying that he was putting his hat in the ring once again because people wanted him back. This after a defeat in January this year at the hands of his former Health Minister Maithripala Sirisena. But obviously the overwhelming number of Sri Lankans choosing for change. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe saying that this was a consolidation of the revolution brought in January when Rajapaksa was voted out, and now they must go on to bring in the promises and continue with the momentum brought in January. For the people of Sri Lanka, it's very much about deciding their fate. Manel Fernandez for Inside Story in Colombo.
Let's bring in our guests. Talking to us from Colombo, Rajiva Wijasena, Senior Professor at the University of Sabaragamuwa and former UPFA Member of Parliament. In London, Ravi Kumar, General Secretary of the British Tamils Forum. And also in Colombo, on Skype, Iran Wickramaratne, United National Party member and Deputy Minister of Highways and Investment Promotions for the Sri Lankan government. Welcome to all three of you, gentlemen. Let me start off with you, Iran Wickramaratne. What is your response to the fact that Rajapaksa has been defeated here?
Yes, it is certainly a consolidation of what happened in January. The country has gone in the same direction. President Sirisena has got a new platform of good governance. Ranil Wickremesinghe's United National Party has swept the polls and secured a majority. The other parties who are not in the coalition will want to make sure that the government is stabilized. And also, Wickremesinghe is due to be sworn in quickly and also invite members of President Sirisena's party to join his government.
Yeah, so talk us through what's going to happen other than that politically, the next maneuvers.
President Rajapaksa's attempt to take control of his party has also, I think, been defeated now. And the likelihood is that President Sirisena will take control of the party, which means that opposition will be split. So the government will certainly be a strong one. There will be political stability. And I think the government will be able to focus on the work of the business of government.
Rajiva Wijasena, what is your response to the results?
Well, as someone who supported President Maithripala Sirisena for the reforms, but then did not contest with this winning alliance, I was rather sad that we didn't push on very quickly in January. I think one of the problems was that Ranil Wickremesinghe and the UNP wanted very much to consolidate their victory. And therefore, they engaged in certain practices which I think were improper, including financial. But
so can I just draw you back to the results of today's vote and the fact that Rajapaksa has not succeeded in his quest to become Prime Minister?
Well, it was always quixotic after his defeat last time. It wasn't too bad in that it's, 42% to 46, which I don't think is too bad. I think the real winner in this is President Maithripala Sirisena, who came out on a platform of reform. But unfortunately, the UNP concentrated on its own strength and didn't move into what I was very pleased to hear Iran say, inviting the leadership, the moderate leadership of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the UPFA to join it. I think there was an attempt to make the last government, which was the minority government, solely UNP. Maybe that was because of a lack of confidence. But I certainly hope that President Sirisena will make sure that we build on consensus and that we also do the reforms to strengthen Parliament, introduce a code of conduct, have electoral reform that were all pledged in the January manifesto. We were told they would happen within 100 days. They were all completely ignored.
Okay, we are going to deal with those issues a little later on. Sorry, excuse me jumping in again. Can you explain to me why you felt that Rajapaksa would want to become Prime Minister? I mean, what is it that he was trying to do?
Well, I think initially in January he gave up the leadership of the party to President Sirisena. But instead of strengthening the SLFP, the Prime Minister didn't really include the senior leadership of the party in what was supposed to be a national cabinet. And also there were efforts to persecute President Rajapaksa for various misdemeanors. I remember saying, when I was pleased that President Sirisena won, I said we should treat the former president with respect. Because obviously, he was popular for his achievement in getting rid of terrorism. He failed to move on reconciliation as he should have. I was advised on reconciliation, and many of the suggestions I made were not pushed through. But I hope now that that element also will be taken forward, because we didn't mention it in the manifesto because there was nervousness about trying to, move on reforms for the Tamils. I think we need to concentrate on the Tamil population, but not the former Tigers. And in that respect, I think I'm very pleased that the TNA has done fairly well. They're the more moderate elements amongst the Tamils.
Okay, well, let's bring in
I think they've also
the Tamils,
done
if I may.
well in the election.
Kumar, what is your response to the results today, and what do you think this really means for you?
Yeah, while looking at the consolidation of power by Ranil Wickremesinghe in the south, the Tamils have made a very decisive decision by voting to TNA for their their circumstance since the end of the war has not changed, not having progress on the last 6 years of the war. They are not happy with the way the things are taken forward, because there are conditions, both living conditions and various other issues, important issues like the missing person, disappeared person, and the heavily militarized conditions in their region made them to decide to not to vote for any of the singular parties.
All right, let's talk more about President Sirisena. I mean, he took office about 7 months ago and he's already implemented some reforms. He began scaling back the powers of the president and investigating accusations of corruption within the government. His administration lifted some media and travel restrictions for foreigners and released several political prisoners on bail. But many say that's not the same as letting them go free. Some of these prisoners are human rights activists, and there are conditions on their releases. They've had to give up their passports and are still required to check in with police monthly. And Sirisena has appointed his brother and son-in-law to senior government positions, raising concerns that he's continuing Rajapaksa's trend of nepotism. Is that what he is doing, Iran?
I want to disagree with the fact that President Sirisena is giving into nepotism. President Sirisena's brother was already in government, and he has been appointed as a chairman of a government institution. I would hardly call that nepotism. I think he's very conscious of the fact. He's very conscious of the fact.
No, but he's moved his son-in-law to the Ministry of Defence position and his brother to become chairman of Sri Lanka Telecoms.
Yes, Sri Lanka has, in the telecoms industry is deregulated, and we have many companies. His brother was a government servant and has been appointed to that position. And I don't think there is any intention to go down that road. He certainly has improved the climate in the country as you described it. We've had a very peaceful election, probably the most peaceful election since independence 67 years ago. So clearly we can see the fruits of the president's way of governing the country. I think he's really setting the stage for further changes. We had a minority government over the past 7 months, and now we have an opportunity with a majority in parliament to actually keep moving forward. I think the issue that was raised in terms of improving the country's or dealing with the issues relating to the war, that was on one side. The other thing I would say is that we will be looking forward as well for a period of stability where the economic agenda of the country will be basically on the front burner.
Ravi, do you agree with that? I mean, Sirisena did say when he took office that he would try and stamp out the racist policies of his predecessor. Is this something that you see?
Yeah, the real issues were not addressed by Sirisena government or Ranil in the last 6 months. They don't even want to touch any serious issues affecting the Tamils in the short term and long term. If you take their manifestos, the political solution, neither party has subscribed or came out clearly about the political solution for the ethnic conflict going on for the last 65 years. And also there is no clear indication of how far these reforms go and how far it will benefit for the war victims and the victimized region war in the northern east.
Talk to me about why you feel that there is this, what it sounds like you're saying is this reluctance to deal with issues in the Tamil North. Why are there so few changes there?
Because until now, the simple things like releasing a comprehensive list of surrendered or detained during the last phase of the war has not been released. What I mean by comprehensive list is those who were arrested, the names of those arrested, and if they are released, who are they, who they were, and who they were handed over to, and who are detained still. This is something very simple to show a goodwill gesture for the kith and kin who are searching for their relatives for the last 6 years, even in the last 6 months of the 6-month duration of the new regime. They have come out very clearly by showing a list of, releasing a list of detainees' names. Because it's already there. As far as we know, the government has always had the list of detainees right from the beginning when they were arrested, and these kind of things has to be released immediately so that the confidence building process can take place very gradually.
Rajiva, do you think that there has been some sort of reluctance in dealing with these issues because Sirisena depends too much on the Senegalese vote? I mean, it's the same vote of those responsible for the Tamil sufferings at the end of the war. Some of those linked to some of the atrocities.
No, I think the delay in handling things was entirely because, as I said, this government was really not interested in doing anything except winning the election. As I said, there were delays on moving on reconciliation. There were delays in moving on the political reforms, the strengthening of the other institutions. Now, I do hope that with the election behind us, we will move very quickly on these. I don't think there's any fear of the Sinhalese, and I think this election proved it. This is what I used to tell President Rajapaksa when he said, the Sinhalese may not support it. I said the Sinhalese are all in favor of a solution for the Tamils. They were very much against terrorism and were very grateful to him for getting rid of terrorism. But I think all opinion polls showed that they were in favor of moving on reconciliation. I think it is important that we move in terms of what I would call restorative justice rather than retribution, because that will raise hackles. And I think we need to make sure that we work in terms of the lessons learned and Reconciliation Commission reports, the draft national reconciliation policy I prepared together with Iran and one of the best people in the TNA. And those are things we must take forward without fear. But we also have to remember that security is important. We need to make sure that terrorism doesn't arise. I personally think that the best way of ensuring that is by actually making sure that the Tamils and indeed all minorities feel they are fully part of the body politic. And that is why the whole policy of empowerment in the north and east as well as elsewhere is extremely important. I hope we move on this now and make up for the time lost in the last 6 months.
Right, you were talking about the atrocities committed during the civil war. For years, the Sri Lankan government has been criticised over its handling of human rights violations. The UN estimates around 40,000 civilians were killed in the final months of the civil war that ended in 2009. And Rajapaksa, who was president at the time, has refused to cooperate with the UN investigation. When President Sirisena took office, he set up a domestic inquiry into the alleged war crimes, but he's since said he doesn't believe war crimes were committed. And like Rajapaksa, he won't let UN war crimes investigators visit Sri Lanka. Why won't he do that, Iran? What's the problem there?
Yeah, I think you need to look at the context. You have had 10 years of a Rajapaksa regime. You had a war, a huge conflict, and then lots of collateral damage. Then you have Sirisena very unexpectedly becoming president of the country, which was a welcome thing, and I think everybody should welcome it. And then, as you know, you take over a situation like that, you are naturally focused on the consolidation of power. And I think that's an important thing. And it certainly the last few months.
Yes, but why should that prevent him from allowing UN inspectors to do their work? What's that got to do with consolidating power?
No. I think you have to look at the whole thing together. And then he has a minority government and he's president. And certainly there could be lots of instability. And Rajapaksa's used parliament basically to destabilize. What has happened today with the election result is that there is stability now because he's got a parliament in his favor, a prime minister who is going to work with him, and I think we're going to see lots of movement on a lot of these things. I think the former government promised to move ahead on the LLRC report, and our government is committed to it. We will have the internal processes working. While we are working on that, we will certainly be also focusing on there was a reference to actually alleviating the living conditions of the people living in the north. We certainly, the economy has suffered over a period of time, and we will put a lot of emphasis on that. And certainly some of the foreign direct investment that comes, we will direct into the northern region as well.
Ravi, do you think that's a fair excuse for Sirisena not to address some of the requests to investigate crimes linked to the civil war? And what are you expecting from the UNHCR report, which is due to come out next month?
The term collateral damage is such an insult and excuse for the criminals committed heinous crimes against the innocent civilians in the war zone, that what we have credible evidence is that there are evidences for that code that says there are targeted shellings, bombings against innocent civilians. That even then, when the coordinates are given to the ICRC and the ICRC conveyed it to the security military hierarchy, within few minutes, the heavy shelling targeting those hospitals. These kind of things shouldn't have happened. It is not just by a soldier or a commander. What we have in our hand is showing that this goes to the very high level. That's why we repeatedly telling that Sri Lanka cannot take this accountability process and hide it within the perimeter of their bureaucratic structure. We need an investigation that has to be undertaken by the international community. It has to be an international mechanism by the UN. We are waiting for the report to be released very soon. The OSL report will come out, and we are pretty much sure that the report will have damning evidence and damning information about the atrocities committed, and we expect that report will tell or indicate some of the people who were perpetrating these crimes.
Okay, I'm going to jump in now. I mean, Rajiva, so many things happening in Sri Lanka at the moment. You've got Sirisena consolidating his power now, the UN report coming out, as well as Sirisena leading the country away from China, closer to India. What sort of impact do you think that'll have on the country and regionally?
Well, I think the manifesto the president announced in January, and I think that was confirmed, in fact, in the manifesto of his party, because all the Rajapaksa was candidate for prime minister, and I don't think Sirisena was happy. The manifesto reflected the fact that we needed to go back to the traditional non-aligned policies of that particular party. And in that process, I think India must necessarily come first, not only because it is our closest neighbor, but because, you know, in times of great difficulty during the war against terror, they stood with us, while at the same time they were very clear that this should be for the sake of the Tamil people. I think that needs to be recalibrated. We need to take account their worries as well, in particular things like emerging terrorism. There have been some reports about India where they too have been victims of national and international terrorism. And I think we need to work together with them. This doesn't mean alienation from China, because China also has stood with us. And I think we need to continue to work with them. I know there are myths that we were turning to China instead of India. The fact remains that the Hambantota harbour was offered first to India, but India wasn't able to take it up. As they said, they have very long systems for taking decisions. But I think we have to make sure that their sensitivities are guarded, while at the same time continue with good relations with China and indeed with Asia. We also need to make sure that we keep good relations with the West, but we must not go into the dependency on the West. That was the fault of the long UNP government in the 80s, which actually alienated India as part of its, participation in the Cold War in those days.
Iran,
so
I'm
we need to be non-aligned, but
where
not
you see
talk to
Sirisena, excuse me
everybody.
jumping in here, Rajiva. Iran, I'm just wondering where you see Sirisena taking the country to now from a regional point of view.
I think it's very clear that there has been a rebalancing of our foreign policy. India being our closest neighbor and lots of cultural ties, we have been able to rebalance that relationship. In addition to that, we have also basically strengthened our relationship with Europe and the US. These are Sri Lanka's traditional friends. These are our export markets. So our foreign policy basically seeks to protect our markets too. So I think we have got a much better balance rather than being isolated in the world. And we are going to look to our friends to understand that this is a new government who's just got a majority, and then we need to be given the space internationally, basically to deal with the aftermath of the war that was there, which was basically a war which was fought by the former regime, and basically to deal with the consequences of that. We do not condone for a moment the injustices that have been done, and that's why we need the space to deal with it through our internal processes.
Okay.
At the same time, we give top priority basically to the economy and to see the economic growth, particularly of the war-affected areas and the other deprived areas in the south of the country.
Well, let's leave it there. Very big thank you to my guests, Iran Wickramaratne, also Ravi Kumar and Rajiva Wejasena. Thank you, gentlemen. And thank you very much for watching this episode of Inside Story. If you have any comments about today's show, you can get in touch by going to our program page at aljazeera.com or post your comments on facebook.com/AJ Inside Story or tweet us at AJ Inside Story. From me, Jane Dutton, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching. Bye.